how are you actively remembering God's goodness? Because it's not something that is just going to happen all the time.
Yeah. No.
So how are we going to actively remember God's goodness in our house?
Yeah.
Hello, Hill City family, and welcome back to the Hill City podcast. We're so happy to have you here.
Woo! Happy New Year's!
Oh yeah, Happy New Year! 2024.
What?
I'm Karen.
I'm Andy. We are the two halves of the creative team for Hill City, and we are also married, for those who may not know.
To each other.
To each other, yes.
Oh. We are. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited to just kind of embark in this new year and just kind of see what God has in store as we continue to just move forward as a church, and also as we move forward in our own lives, in our own marriage union, just kind of seeing the new things and knowing some things that are going to be happening in the next year. It's going to be awesome.
Do you have any New Year's resolutions? Or what are your thoughts on New Year's resolutions?
I don't have any. Well, actually, no, I do. There is an editing program that I feel like I want to really get to know in this new year. So I've kind of made a resolution to myself to be like, okay. But also, I found someone to like, who's like, oh, yeah, I want to do that same thing as well. So I feel like that will be cool to like, okay, we're going to learn this program this year and it will be helpful and beneficial for me as a creative. But yeah, I think that's something that I want to kind of do in the upcoming year. But my thoughts on New Year's resolutions overall, in general, are conflicted a little bit because there is the idea of like, oh, I'm just going to do something, but I'll wait till next year to start it. And I feel like if you're doing that, then it's probably not going to work out. But I think that there is something that is powerful about people who are doing something in community with one another. And I think that the new year is like a great time to be able to partner with other people and to have other people who are on the same page of being like, oh, we're joining in with you to also do this thing. And so I feel like when you have the power of community, those resolutions can actually become quite strong. And they can become really useful for you as an individual and as a person, but also for a community. Does that make sense?
Do you have any of that?
Well, with this last one, I have someone else that I'm joining with to learn this program.
I guess when I just hear the word community, I'm automatically think of just church,
right? Which
is not, I guess, always the case. But I'm like, what
other community? That's our whole community right now. But no, I think so. I think. In my mind, if you're doing it that way, where you're joining with other people, whether it's something practical, like, oh, we're all going to like eat better this year, or we're all going to do something where you guys can check in and encourage one another. I think that that's kind of fun. And that is like a great way to use it. But I think if you're just like isolating yourself and just kind of doing it like, I'm going to do this alone and not in community, then I don't know. That's going to be tough.
Some driven people are pretty. They don't need anybody else to help them. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, it's possible, but I think it's just much harder, right? If you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together.
Oh.
The old poster.
Is that one of those things with like, it was black and it had like an outline, a little.
Yeah. And like it's next to the cat.
Would it say teamwork or something?
Hang in there.
Oh.
But yeah. So that's kind of my initial thoughts. What about you? Do you have any resolutions for this upcoming year?
I don't. I also feel conflicted about New Year's resolutions. I think just like growing up, my family was very like, we had to have goals. I guess it's goals more than like a resolution. I don't know if that's the same.
I feel like it's similar.
But we had to have like 4 goals every year. And it's like financial, physical, spiritual, and I don't know, maybe emotional. And so, yeah, I was just very like pragmatic and like orderly, which is great.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know, I guess I was just always pretty like driven.
Mhm.
So it wasn't like difficult for me to like meet my goals.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
usually like get straight A's
Done.
and read my Bible every day. I don't know.
Right.
I don't think I did that when I was younger, but yeah, I guess I'm just more about like habits and or not I guess like lifestyle, which is built up of habits,
Right.
which don't necessarily have to start in the new year.
No.
But I guess it's a good time to like evaluate your habits and
Yeah.
your lifestyle. But like, you know, they say it takes 21 days to
Right.
like make something like an actual habit.
Right.
So I don't know. I guess any New Year's resolutions I've had aren't things that I can like stick out for 21 days straight.
Right.
But if it's just like, you know, like a lifestyle of eating healthy,
Right.
it's like, okay, I can vary the types of food I eat and make sure I'm buying vegetables when
Right.
I go grocery shopping.
Yeah.
Because I used to not do that. But yeah. So yeah, just overall healthy lifestyle.
I think that's good. And I think the idea of what you're thinking in goals is like people sometimes put lofty deals of like,
Yeah.
I'm going to like read the whole Bible in the first half, or I'm going to read the Bible 3 times over within the first year. You know what I mean? It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, like, but is that really like
But even the goal of like reading every day
right?
is great and you should.
Yes.
But like if you don't, I don't know. It just
But-
feels like you should have a lifestyle
Right.
of pursuing God daily, whatever that looks like.
So maybe
Rather than like a checkbox that you're going to get mad at yourself
right.
for not meeting.
Right. So more of a like a thing that's just kind of like more so than being like, this is like a hard line.
Yeah.
These are the numbers. And if I don't hit these numbers and I failed, more of like, this is the direction I'm moving towards. And I
Yeah.
want to do more of this and less of that.
Mm-hmm.
Those types of goals I think are good. They're even more powerful once again when you just have people to help you. And it just doesn't become one of those things where it's like, oh, I kind of maybe did this. But it's like, no, did you spend more time or less time? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
With the Lord. But yeah, I think that also, I think about one thing that I want to do more of, which is kind of using the new year to not just set goals about what's going on ahead of us, but to reflect on everything that God has already done in this past year and like reaccounting myself with like the victories and like the times that God has really shown up in our lives, in your life or in anyone's life. And I think that doing that, reminding yourself, because I think we are apt and quick to forget of like the different times that he has shown up and that he's moved and he's did incredible things. And we'll move into the next year like, I just hope I do better. And I hope this is going better. I hope this is increased. And like, that is like a part of the goal for God in our lives is like to like have increase and to us to be fruitful and multiplying and expanding the domain that he's like continuing to have us to kind of operate in. But also, I think one thing that we can definitely learn from Hebraic culture is just that idea of like the remembrance of what God has done. And they had all sorts of different celebrations and feasts and different times that they would set aside just to remember everything God has done. Just kind of recalling all the things that he's done for you is a good practice that I want to do more of in my own life, in our lives as we think about the year.
Yeah, that's funny you said that because we actually have, when we did our seed for the unseen or whatever, and what was it, 2022?
Yes.
I think for Hill City. I guess that's something we still need to work on. That's something we wrote on there, like memorializing like what the Holy Spirit has done.
Yeah.
Or not, what God has done.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, the word memorial has actually been on my mind for the last few months. Like, what does it mean to memorialize what God has done? And like what, like who in the Bible, like basically it made me think of Jacob.
Okay.
But then like the rock that he slept on, I can't remember if it was monument or memorial, the word that was used.
But it was one.
But like, remember that this place, it's like, so like he had somewhere physical he could go back to and remember, like God literally met me here.
Right.
So yeah, like what does that look like in our lives? How do we memorialize? Maybe that's what we could talk about.
Yeah. I think that that's interesting because it is like, that's a tricky deal, right? Because like there's even thinking about the story of Jacob was like he left with a limp,
Yeah.
right? Like he had something to remember
Yeah, his body knew
that
that
his
he
body,
had met God.
his body will not forget the time and place where he was when he encountered with God, but he still wanted something tangible there at the place, like to
Mhm.
remember not just like the interaction, but like something to memorialize that place that he was at
Mhm.
and where he encountered God. And because especially in that time, they felt like, you know, in certain places the veil was thin and they wanted to make sure he knew, like, okay, I really encountered God here and the veil feels thin
Oh,
there
you mean like between
heaven and earth.
heaven and earth?
Yeah.
So we've been talking about like looking back, or you talked about looking back on the past and how that kind of influences, or maybe it influences like your vision for the new year. So we're kind of talking about like memorializing. So is it important or what? Well, we already talked about it is important to memorialize what God's done, but like, what does that look like now? You know, like Jacob had a rock that he said, I don't know, it might have been big.
Big rock.
I'm like, well, it was a small rock. I'm like, how would you know?
Everyone come.
You're walking back in the wilderness and you're just like, wait, where's the
Come
rock?
take a look at Big Rock. This one I made. I think, wasn't it an altar though?
Yeah, it probably was.
Yeah, I thought he.
I would assume he had poured oil on it. Or
Yeah.
something. Maybe
But
I
yeah.
should have read that story before bringing it.
But yeah, I think the idea of like memorializing in our modern day is a bit tricky. Like I just can't put a big rock in my front lawn and
You
be
know
like,
what? Some people memorialize things on social media.
yes, some people do.
But I'm just thinking, like, you know, you get your little time hop and you're like, hey,
Yeah.
3 years ago, I said God did this.
And he's done it. No, I think that is a way that people do it now. But yeah, it just looks different now than it does then. But I think that, especially some of our senior leaders, I'm thinking about Izzy in particular, has been like really like about trying to use social media in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to use it to do things like memorializing like things that God has done of like, hey, I'm believing in God for this. God showed up in this way.
Yeah.
And like, this is how I'm letting everyone kind of see the process behind this and kind of, rather than just being like, you know, whatever else people could use it for.
Yeah.
But I think that that is a powerful way because like, you know, as they say, once it's on the internet, it's kind of there. It's kind of there forever. Right. And so that is kind of a way to be able to do it. Do you have any other ways that you?
I mean, I like to journal, so it is nice, like being able to read old journals and be like, oh my gosh, I forgot that happened. Oh my gosh, I forgot that happened. Yeah, it's really, really emotional reading old journals because you know I've been writing for so long, so it's like it's before I met you,
Right.
and like before we had kids, like
Right.
all these, just you know, like the desires of your heart, and
Right.
then they come to pass and you're like, man, God is so good. But then also, yeah, you remember the hard seasons. You're like, wow, God was really with me then. And that was really hard.
Yeah.
But I think it's more about making it a habit of remembering because, you know, like I said, I could write it down, but if I don't go like read my journals, then I'm not bringing it back up to my mind. So like I know Taylor and Steven on their refrigerator, you know, they have like a list and it says like answered prayers.
Yeah.
So it's just there.
Right.
So I think it's about like, you know, like the Bible says, putting it before your eyes.
Right.
Like, how are you actively remembering God's goodness? Because it's not something that is just going to happen all the time.
Yeah. No.
So how are we going to actively remember God's goodness in our house?
Yeah. I think one way that we have done it, but we can continue to increase it is just doing communion. I think that is like, you know what I mean? Like
family
it is
communion.
one of the way. Yeah. Family communion.
Yeah.
Like it was also a commandment from Jesus, like do this frequently.
Maybe we do we do list out things.
Yeah. And communion.
And do communion.
Yeah.
All right. Ask us about this later. New Year's resolution. We got to figure out how often we're going to do it so that we'll actually do it.
But yeah, I think that kind of going about it in that way of just kind of doing those things where you're remembering Christ and you're taking those things in the elements, I think is like a way to kind of like submit the things that you're grateful for and to submit the things that God is doing for you. Because I think that, yeah, the posture of gratitude is what is going to allow you to be humble, right? When you're grateful for all the things that God has done for you, you understand that they are His. So like kind of taking those ideas and just kind of, especially in this year, right? As we're kind of moving, and whether you started in September or whether you're starting kind of now, just kind of being like, okay, like this is the thing that I'm going to get on board with other believers. And kind of like the thing that I was talking about at the beginning of like, when we're doing it in community, it's not so much of like just like the time that you start doing it, but doing it in community with other people. You're gonna see more motion, right? One sends, a fleet, and it continues to compound from there of like the angels that are set in motion. And it's just kind of cool because we've started seeing that when we started focusing in this new year, and people started seeing new opportunities and financial things, and like new opportunities were just kind of going, and people were having testimony after testimony of like the Lord doing that. We had a testimony of like the Lord just continuing to be able to being faithful in those ways, to be able to continue to provide for this household. So I think kind of joining in with the Hill City family as we're all kind of focused in on this, and as we kind of hone in on what we're wanting to do, will be a great, and we'll see transformation within our own lives and within the community of the church that we're part of.
Yeah, and I think another way, like obviously we talked about like in our own family, but just like you were saying, testimonies. Like I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I don't know why it's not a bigger deal. Like I want a testimony every week. I'm like, that is just so encouraging to me to hear somebody's like real life story of what God's done for them.
Right.
So yeah, we can't underestimate the power of hearing from each other. What God's doing. Like so I guess that's more to like myself. Like don't undervalue like the story that you have of what God's done, even if it's something small this week. Other people would be blessed by it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So that's another way to memorialize what God's done, is like tell other people.
Yeah.
Obviously.
No, yeah. I mean,
it builds their faith.
Yeah. I mean, it reminds me of the passage in Revelation where it talks about, they will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of the testimony, right? And that idea of just being like, okay, like that has to be pretty powerful if you're you're pulling these things and together with each other, of being like, hey, like the blood of the Lamb is like obviously number one.
Yeah.
Duh. But the word of the testimony, holding into account the things that God has done for you, is just, I mean, it's what the Bible is, right? It's a huge testimony of God's love and pursuit of us, and then continued of His divine holiness and of His benevolence and omnipresence. Like it just tells us more about the character of God and Christ and all those things and how they unfold into one, right? Through the Bible. And it's just kind of cool to think about it that way.
Yeah. We're going to talk about, wanted to talk about the Hebraic year being what is our calendar called? It's not geriatric. I can't remember what it's Germanic?
Germanic.
It doesn't matter. I mean, I guess it does, but I don't know.
G.
The G calendar. Obviously, in the States, we follow that calendar, and we are starting a new year. But in the Hebraic calendar, the new year started in, I think, mid-September.
Yes.
And so we just kind of want to talk about what we've kind of learned about that year, the number of the new year for the Hebraic calendar, and what that means to us. So the year now in the Hebraic calendar is 5784. 5784. Did you find anything interesting about that? What?
Yes, I just want to disclose we are not Hebrew scholars.
Not at all.
We have taken 0 classes. If you really
that's not true.
Have you taken a class?
I'm in a Bible project class.
But I mean, like, we haven't taken like a
on
class,
the Hebrew Bible.
but there's no one grading you.
There are anyway. No.
We are not degreed professors.
Nope.
We have not been ordained as
I have a degree
Jewish ministers.
in mathematics.
And just Jewish. We haven't been ordained as Jewish ministers, as rabbis.
No.
There's lots of people who do those types of things and are great resources for it. But we just kind of want to have a more.
And you might be.
If you
Please
are,
comment
grace
below.
for us.
Well, also just share your wisdom.
And please get in contact with us. We would love to know more
Yeah.
and learn more. But we just kind of want to do a brief bird's eye view of some of the things behind the new year for those who may know less or the same as we do
Mm-hmm.
in just
Probably
different
the
areas.
same.
I would imagine around the same.
But we have thoughts
Yeah,
that
And-
not everybody might have.
maybe.
Okay. What are your thoughts?
I think the idea behind the Jewish New Year is actually interesting. This is another time where they believe during this time of the year that
September? You mean?
Yes.
Like the new year?
Their count. I mean, not September, but yeah, during that phase of their calendar, because the Hebraic New Year moves because the Hebraic calendar has 355 days.
But you mean like the new year time?
Yes, their New
When
Year
it is
time.
the
Yes,
New
when it
Year.
was happening during that season was the month that they believed that like the king was in the fields. Was kind of the idea and the process that they were kind of thinking about. So the reason why like the New Year's and Rosh Hashanah and all those things were happening around that time is because they believed that the veil between the Lord and them was thin.
Oh, I was thinking like earthly king.
Oh, no, I think they meant like the
Mm.
spiritual king was like in the fields, but they use that metaphor of like being like the king being in the fields, being with the people,
Hmm.
working with the people during that season,
Mhm.
during that time. And so that's where they were, you know, really making sure they were taking an account of all the different things during those seasons. So, you know, making right different wrongs, making sure they're kind of measuring things up, because during that time also is a time where they believe that like the Jesus, or not Jesus, obviously not Jesus, but when the Lord would write in the Lamb's book of records of like
Oh.
people's, like their names would be written in the Lamb's book of records during that time.
Hmm.
So that's why they would want to make sure that they like would get right with each other and want to make sure they're doing like extra good deeds, which actually reminds us of,
Christmas?
yeah, Christmas and New Year's, right? Like you have a time where people like are thinking in that same mindset of like, I want to make sure that I'm getting right with other people, and I want to make sure I'm doing good things and having a lot of, I guess, positive. People think about positive energy or like just good vibes out there, right? They just want it because it's like the season where everyone's kind of doing that. So that's kind of fitting for us to be thinking about this during this time frame, because leading up to this point of the new year, even though there's kind of starts with the new year and then it kind of proceeds from there, it kind of has a similar vibe of like, oh, we're thinking about making things right, even though people don't think about Jesus being as a reason for the season for some of that. People in the world, believers do, but
Mhm.
just kind of thinking about it in that thought process is like, oh, that's a cool parallel between those two things.
That's interesting. So I looked at like the numbers, and like as some of us know, the numbers correlate to letters,
Yes.
which also have pictures
Mhm.
associated with them. So I didn't really look at like 5 and 7 too
Right.
much, just the 80 and the 4.
But in general, we know that 5 is the number of that typically responds to grace, and 7 is a number that continues to have a representation of completion.
So 80, the number is usually associated with the letter Pei, which is the 17th letter of the alphabet. I just love saying that. Alphabet. The pictograph for Pei looks something like a mouth. It's kind of like a oval
Mhm.
kind of thing. So I found something that says, let me just read it. So the word Pei means mouth, and by extension, word, expression, vocalization, speech, and breath. And in the order of the Hebrew alphabet, Pei follows the letter Ayin. I don't know if I'm saying that right. suggesting the priority of the eyes, which is ayin, understanding, awareness, before verbal expression. So, like mind, like reversing this order results in blind consumption. So not seeing.
Right.
Or no, talking the mouth before seeing. Or mindless chatter. And so like ayin gives insight, but it is the mouth or pei that gives the insight expression. Which is interesting.
That is interesting.
So that's 80. 4, I believe, was dalet. Was the letter.
Yes.
And the pictograph was like a door, drawing out or in.
Yes.
Knocking, path, way, portal to heaven, dominion. And then also, according to Jewish traditions and customs, this letter, dalet, symbolizes lowliness and the consciousness of possessing nothing of one's own.
Yeah.
As a door, dalet also symbolically represents the choice to open ourselves to hope or to remain closed off and alienated.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that, and also a picture of when people talk about the door or the gate where you have to unload things. So there's an idea of humility that kind of
You
comes
mean
on.
like to fit in?
To be able to fit in, you have to kind of take off the things that are that are hindering you to being able to enter in. So there is also the idea of humility that comes with dalet that people kind of associate in there with the idea behind the door. But yeah, if you listen to a previous podcast, you know that the Lord has really been speaking to me about the door and about kind of continuing to reveal himself to me in that way, and continuing to kind of reiterate.
Well, there you go.
Him being the door in my life as we do different activations in spiritual. It's kind of one of the things that we kind of have been talking about.
That's cool. I didn't know that. And yeah, I love that idea of lowliness. And because I kind of think sometimes we're like, God is the door to my success, to my fortune.
My lottery ticket is coming in.
Or like, I'm in this lowly state and God is going to be the door that opens me to the ease of whatever. But it's like, so that picture of also maybe it's not, like you're saying, your lotto ticket.
It's not the door of increase, but it could be like a door of humility.
It could be that, like you're saying, like maybe it's a very small, like that's kind of like that, like the passage about like the narrow way. Wasn't it like it's like some kind of picture
for a camel to fit?
No, not that one.
Okay.
The one where it's like take the narrow way instead of the broad way.
Yes.
And I think I read that it's like actually like a military type saying. Basically, there's like when you're trying to like go into a fortress or something,
right? There's
like a really narrow passage in like the wall or whatever of the castle. So it's like not everybody's gonna find it, and it'll be narrow. Yeah. But it's kind of like you can't be like big and haughty and have a bunch of stuff,
right,
and fit in there.
Yeah. No, I agree with you.
But also the camel thing.
No, I think that it is an interesting idea of that sometimes to get to the place that God is calling you to do. And we kind of see that play out in the scriptures all the time and time again. As like to kind of get to the place where God is calling you to be, and for you to really become whom God is calling you to be. He'll call you to a place where a lot of times you'll be stripped of the things that you had access to that you might have thought would have helped you get to your goal. But in the process of what he's doing, like you're actually getting closer to the thing that he's truly ordained for you. It makes me think about Abraham of like you would think in our mind's eye that like him being young and fervor would have been like, oh, this is a time for me to bless you with children. But God like let his youth go away. All right. And allow him that time to continue to go. Because there's time between the promise. There's still time even between he was older when he got the promise, and he was even older when the child came to pass. And it was still like that time of like going through the door of not humiliation, but of humility, and being like, there's only really one way that this is going to really make sense, and one way that this is going to truly work, and only one person will be able to get the credit for it when we reach the other side and the fulfillment of this promise.
Yeah, that's like the whole realizing you don't own anything.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Isn't that the ultimate goal? For God to actually get glory. Not just like that we say like, oh, God be the glory, but like, be like, no, there's like no way like I could have gotten here, or like this could have happened.
Right.
If God had not been involved.
Yeah, I think that is powerful. And then, I mean, a lot of people put a big emphasis in the last number of the new year, because that is the new changing, revolving number as we continue to go in until, obviously you have years of 10, and then that will obviously be a double digit change, or still a single number change, but in that spectrum of 10. But yeah, so the idea of the door has a heavy emphasis. I know we've had Pastor Ken kind of teach on that a little bit, and the idea of that door being something that keeps things in, keeps things out, as they're talking about in the transcription of Dalet.
Cool. Well, I think that's it for today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Hill City Podcast.
Woo-hoo.
And yeah, I pray just that God reveals to you how you can memorialize what he's done for you.
Yeah.
In whatever way. I'm not going to limit him.
Yeah.
But if you have any questions or want to give feedback, or you're smarter than us and have something else, you're all smarter than us. If you have something you would like to add, because you do.
You do.
I believe you can email us at info@hillcitynow.com, and we would love to hear from you.
And don't be afraid to get in the comments if you have something that you would love to add to this particular conversation. And if you've done studies in the Hebraic year, or whether you have things that you want to talk about for your New Year's resolutions, like, talk to us, like, get in the comments, let us know, make those declarations, right? Put it out. If you have a testimony, put it in there. Like, those are the things we want to see.
All right. We love you guys.
Love you. Peace.